How were you injured?
I was shot.
You were shot.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I was attacked by a drone, and second, after I healed my injuries, the second injury was a knife. We had a fight with a Ukrainian. I had a knife here, but it was not that serious, so I didn't have to go back to the town for treatment. Now the third injury was the bullet. It was a cross-range bullet because my enemy was like 3 meters ahead, and it hit me from this place. Ikatokea this other side.
Right. From Cairo to Cape Town, Lagos to Lamu. 54 nations, one continent, countless perspectives. Hi, I'm Waweru Njoroge.
Hi, I'm Okoh.
Welcome to Panel 54, a global perspective through an African lens. This is the podcast where we unpack power, policy, people, and the paradoxes that define our time, with nuance, with history, and with a deliberate commitment to context. This isn't punditry, it's perspective. It's not a briefing, it's a reframing, and it starts right here.
When most people think about the war in Ukraine, they don't think about Africa. But over the past year, there's been a growing number of stories that suggest something else is happening quietly in the background.
Young men leaving home for what they believe are job opportunities and ending up in a war they never signed up for, at least not in the way they understood it.
And that's the question we're unpacking today. Not just what's happening, but how it's happening and who or what is making it possible.
We're joined by David Mutai and Njenga to help us understand how this unfolds, both from the perspective of a family and from someone who has been through it. So thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining us on Panel 54 for a very important conversation that has been a long time coming, actually, in terms of what we want to cover today. We're going to jump straight into it. And before we actually then start looking at the systems and the actual structures, we need to understand how this begins, more so at an individual level. Obviously, we're talking very personal matters here. How did this actually start in the first place? Tell us your story in your own words, basically. And I think it started in May 2025? May 12, 2025. And then also the last time you heard from your son, Felix.
August 8, 2025.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Somewhere in February, Felix went to apply for a passport. He got his passport in Kericho office on the 18th. He applied on the 18th of February, and on 28th, he had got his passport. And we come from up country, so he traveled to Nairobi to hustle around to look for some jobs. So he used to tell me how he's hustling about getting some job. Then around I think it was around 1st of May, he shared me a visa that he's got an opportunity to travel to Russia to participate in the war. And I got shocked that you're going to a war. He said it's an opportunity. It's a rare opportunity. When we get there, we shall be paid instantly 2.3 million. And then the agent is going to take $1 million. We remain with 1.3, and every month we are going to get 300,000. So it looked like it was lucrative, but it was a very dangerous venture.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, I advised him not to. I told him we can still get opportunities around and make the ends meet. It doesn't mean that you have to go there. And then I also shared with somebody else the visa he shared with me. It was a tourist visa, taking 10 days. He was to be in Istanbul and be back by 22nd of May. The visa was elapsing. Once we get there, we shall have some interim kind of passport. I don't know how to explain to it. So it is taken care of. 2 days too, that was on 10th. I reached out to him and told him that Dad, I see that venture to be so dangerous. Just come around. He was working in a mining company back at home, and I told him that, why don't you come? Then I talked with the mining company to see whether they can still reinstate you. And he told me, yeah, even me, I'm seeing there's no need of going. On the 11th of May, 8 p.m., my other son, was a student at University of Nairobi here. He had rented a room. It was a 4th year. He's just completed. So they were putting up together. He had no phone, so I used my other son's phone, and we talked. He told me that there are some people pushing me to go for the venture, and I told him, please don't. Tomorrow early in the morning, I reached out to another neighbor who lives here in Nairobi, who works here in Nairobi. In fact, I never reached him. He reached out to me and asked me, is Felix around? I told him, yeah, I talked to him at 8 p.m. and he had assured me that he's not leaving. At what time was he actually supposed to leave? Because I had not seen the visa clearly. The visa was talking about 3 a.m. So I thought maybe it's somewhere in daytime. So he told me that I suspect that he must have left.
So what you saw was his ticket? So what you saw was his visa and the ticket, or just a ticket, an air ticket?
It was an air ticket.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So when I reached out to my son, he told me that he left. He left here at around midnight.
Mm-hmm.
So he's gone, and he had no phone. So we kept quiet for the next 2-3 days. And then after 3 days, I saw a call by WhatsApp in a Kenyan number.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw the call coming in, I just picked, and apparently it belonged to Njenga, and they were together. They were somewhere in a room in St. Petersburg, and showed me some moving vehicles and said, this is where we are putting up. We are to be moved to Rostov for the training. We are going to have a training for 2 weeks, and then we'll go to the battlefield. So we kept conversing for almost a week, discussing on how they are putting up, the meals they are using and whatever. And then after a week, that's when they now informed me that they are moving to Rostov. And there was silence for almost something like a month or so, where we had no communication. And then later on, he now called using a Russian number. So we kept conversing, informing me how they were going about. They were living in a tunnel. They had put up in a tunnel for quite some time. They could not move out. So after some times, he also went off and resurfaced on the 30th of July, and now asked that he can now access some money, and he wanted to send the money.
Looking at how this has been, he's left Kenya, he's gone, you've heard he's in St. Petersburg, he's moving to Rostov, he's gotten money. Who's giving him this money? And is it payment for the work that he's going to do? He's sending money home? What's happening in it?
According to his explanation, is that immediately they arrived in Russia, in Moscow, St. Petersburg.
St. Peters.
There was a contract they signed.
Okay.
And this contract now gave them the power to get the money.
You are to get 2.3 after you sign the contract. Then 1 million was to be taken by the agent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did this happen? Did this actually happen?
Yes.
So you got the 2.3 million shillings.
Yes.
You give 1 million shillings to the agent. Equivalent of that. And this is happening in St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
Did you see an agent? Did you meet a person? Or did you put the money somewhere?
The thing that they do, when we got to St. Peters, we were taken to a bank.
Okay.
What they did, they had access to our accounts. Yeah. And so when we went for training, we did not receive the money yet. But after a few weeks, now we are at war. We received the money. But since we didn't have the phone, ungejua kama ushapata.
Yeah.
So after umerudi place yenye kuna network, unapata we received pesa, but 1 million was deducted.
Okay. So you received money less than 1 million shillings.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm trying to understand something. Thank you for coming to the conversation, Peter. I want to find out, assume that you are the recruiter and I am now you. What did they come and tell you in terms of how did they sell you the idea of go and fight a war in somebody else's country? Yeah. So assume that you're talking to me, you're telling me, Waweru, kuja hapa tuende.
Let's say, sema tu ni shida yenye kuku.
Okay.
Because if I had money, hata singefikiria kwenda
go.
pesa kama hiyo.
Okay.
Unaona? Second, like me, my passion was to become an army, just like my father.
Okay.
I didn't get that chance. Now here, you have been given a good chance, you see, to work abroad as a military. You see? So I said, it's a good chance.
And
did you know what you were?
Yes.
You knew you were going to fight.
I knew.
In the Russian-Ukraine war.
We were being interviewed by a Russian here in Kenya.
Okay.
We even, he showed us videos on how the war is going.
And you met this person?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, come back to you, David. You know your son now is fighting in the Russian-Ukraine war. You are aware at this point. Did you hear from him thereafter? And did you see it? Njenga has told us that it was an opportunity to earn and then also work. Did you see it the same way? You mentioned that you had preferred your son did not go. But at the moment, you didn't know what danger there was. At that time, you didn't know what danger there was. Here was an opportunity for Felix to earn something. How did you see the opportunity at that time?
Personally, I was just against the idea of going.
From the beginning.
But he sold to me an idea of saying this is a lucrative venture. We're going to make money. If, for instance, you get 1.3 million shillings instantly, and then you are going to get 300,000 every month for the period. Okay, he said we are going to serve for 6 months. You are given 2 weeks leave, and then you go back 6 months. Once you complete the 6 months, you are now entitled to be given a Russian residence. You can now be a resident of Russia, and you have now the right of either going back to your country or staying in Russia once you've served in the military for a period of 1 year. So to me, it was just a tricky situation where this is a dangerous venture but lucrative. Okay. So you know you have to make decisions personally. Being an adult and far off from me, I could not restrain him, and he always saw the opportunities which come with it. And also he had some friends who had met like Njenga, and they were encouraging each other that we should be together, at least let us stay solid, we can change our lives in this venture. So when they reached there, of course, the way I told you, he told me that I have seen some money in the bank and I wanted to process this money so that at least you can buy. I have my brother, you can buy him the phone and do some 1 2 with the mother. So he told me that I have bought a phone for 100,000 rubles. And also he wanted to send 150,000 rubles, which in Kenyan money it was almost coming 175 or somewhere there. But the tricky part is it had to be changed from rubles to dollars, and then you change from dollars to Kenyan money. So it took a bit of some time until we got it. And that was it. We never got any other money
After that.
After that.
Njenga, let me ask you a question. From having been inside, how easy was it once your realization in terms of where you are, either being on the front line or this is now a war you're about to get into? At what point do you realize that the opportunity to say, I can't do this? Yeah. How deeply are you inside when you realize you can't actually walk away?
It was too late.
It was too late.
It was too late. Because now you're in the red zone front line. What I expected, it was not as I met. It was worse. Yeah. First, when we were moving, before even going to attacks, the thing that made me to be much afraid were the bodies.
Okay.
They were so scattered everywhere. It's serious. This is death.
Did you understand that before? Because we looked before and there was an agent, there was somebody in Nairobi, and then now you're in St. Petersburg, and then now you're in the red zone. It's a totally different world now.
No,
Did you understand what you were doing? Going to war for Russia against Ukraine, and then now there are bodies all over the place. And what instructions did you have in terms of what you were supposed to be doing?
Of course, it's shooting.
Okay.
Yeah. We were going for attacks. So, our mission was to advance. Yeah, to push
The
Ukrainians
the
back.
Ukrainian, to push them back.
Okay.
Yeah.
aim is to reach Kyiv.
And secure
Our aim was
anybody who was in the way.
to reach Kyiv
Okay.
or the Black Sea.
Okay, so now in terms of what I'd asked you earlier, in terms of that point of no return, the camaraderie, I'm assuming that you were with Felix and you were with other people from not only from Kenya, you had other people from various different countries, right? That came into this war that they, yeah. What was the mood then in terms of, was it your collective being together in a situation where potentially there's a lot of death that kept you guys going? Or was there points where you all talked to each other and said, this is not what we signed up for?
There was no time for that. Now, you signed for this because at first, we were the first people to go to Russia.
Okay.
And what they did, they were only taking ex-militaries.
Okay.
Okay.
So what our agent advised us is to fake our documents
Right.
so that we can have this chance to join. You see? Yeah. So hata tukienda huko, wao wanajua we were militaries. And that's why we were going for only 2 to 3 weeks of training because that was a refreshment training.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So on the other side, they knew that you knew what you were doing to an extent. Okay.
Now
So-
the problem here is the agents. Not my agent. My agent was okay because alituambia what we are going to expect. You see. But what I came to realize after, so many agents walikuwa wanadanganya watu.
So I was going to say, did it feel like deliberate deception? Because agent will say, okay, fine, we'll say that you guys have previous military experience. Him is looking at that 1.1 million that's coming to him, right? He's not worried about whether you have that experience. He doesn't know about the 2 weeks training you're going to have to do. So did it feel like this person deliberately cheated you?
No, for me, no.
Okay.
You knew what you were doing.
We knew what we were doing.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we had a chance to say no, we want to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, David, when is the next time you spoke to Felix?
We used to talk in between because we were also talking with Njenga. Njenga was in a different place.
Okay.
Felix was also in a different place, but at times we could connect and telling me the advancement they're having. In fact, the last time he told me that there was a Tanzanian who came in and he was so worried when he saw what was happening and became so worried and say, this is a dead zone. And he told him, yeah, we are already here. So leave all your worries and just know that you are here. And he told me that the next day that Tanzanian was killed. So the Ghanaian, he was together, he was killed. The last day, on the 7th of August, he told me that they were just walking with their luggage. They have a bulletproof which is 25 kgs and some packages they have for their meals and whatever. So as they were walking, they saw a drone coming, and the drone came and went back. So it immediately ignited his conscience that this drone must be going for a missile. So we need to speed up. So when they tried to run, the drone had already come back. So released the missile. So what he did personally is he removed the bulletproof and the luggage and jumped inside a hole. And there was a loud bang. There was a silence for almost 10 to 15 minutes or somewhere around there. And when he came back to his senses, he just had everybody crying. There was one Colombian and 3 Russians and him as a Kenyan. And the others were groaning on the floor, and within 5 minutes or so, they were all dead. So he's the only one who remained. He was picked up, taken to a makeshift hospital which was nearby. That's where he told me the conversation of what has happened. And in fact, in that conversation, he had just given up. He told me that it's only a matter of time when I'm still alive, because the Ukrainians are intensifying their attacks on us, and we are losing a lot of people. It's not what you are seeing. Russians are losing a lot of people. More than the Ukrainians. And at around evening, at around 8, he told me that I'm in a prohibited area where we are not using the phones. So we cannot make a phone call unless we use text. So I saw, because he was in the hospital, let us give him some time. And then personally, I don't switch off my data. At 6:41 on the 8th of August, he wrote me morning.
And that was it.
And that was the last message. When I wanted to get back, it's not responded to date. When Peter was winding up his contract, I reached out to him whether he had any conversation. Later on, he told me that he had a friend who was in another place who had given him an indication that it's like Felix lost his life, but he was also not so sure. So up to date, we are not so sure. We're not so sure whether he's still there, whether he's dead. We're not so sure. And then also, like the way Njenga said, it's like there's no proper way of accounting for the dead people and how they are being handled. It's like when you are dead, They don't count on it. They just leave you there. Felix also used to tell me that we have a lot of lying bodies here. We are just walking over bodies as they are advancing.
What is in the red zone? There is no time for the bodies to be picked. But in the yellow zone, they always
still come for them.
Yeah, come for them. Now in the red zone, it's war. There is no time for that. That's why they are all scattered everywhere until they advance, and that place becomes the yellow zone. Now they pick up the bodies.
Did you? I mean, that doesn't quite sound right, but you're one of the lucky ones who managed to make it back. But did you get any injuries when you were there?
Yes.
Okay.
So many injuries. Yes. And that's why I had a chance to resign.
So you could You could come back because of your injury.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit, David, because Njenga, you mentioned before that they were taking people who had some kind of military experience. You said that your father was in the military. What experience did you have?
I didn't have any military experience. None. I was going there by passion.
Okay. You wanted to.
Yeah, I wanted.
Okay. So you came back because of an injury, and you could do that, and your contract was coming to an end. It may sound like a painful question for Baba Felix, but if somebody's not been in touch for 7 months, from the experience that you have, having been there, what could that possibly mean?
Sorry to say, but the survival rate of being in the front line, chances are zero. Because then you cannot survive in the front line like for 2 to 3 months now in the red zone. But in the yellow zone, you are okay. You can end your contract without injury. But where you are fighting one-on-one, obvious. It's either you go or they go. Because there are only two chances. Two chances. You come out with injuries or you die. You see.
Okay.
When you get an injury, a serious injury, at least they will move you. And that's become a golden chance when you get an injury.
Try and exit then. You try and exit then. How were you injured?
I was shot.
You were shot.
At first, I was attacked by a drone, and second, after I healed my injuries, the second injury was a knife. We had a fight with a Ukrainian. I had a knife here, but it was not that serious, so I didn't have to go back to the town for treatment. Now the third injury was the bullet. It was a cross-range bullet because my enemy was like 3 meters ahead, and it hit me from this place. Ikatokea this other side.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we go to like the bigger picture in terms of what this does across the continent for folks who are being recruited into this war, whether they know about it or not, do you come to some kind of reconciliation, David, about what could have happened to Felix? Does it settle in your mind that there's a possibility that Felix is dead?
Of course, there's such a possibility. I don't deny. But, we want to bring it to a closure. And bring it to a closure by a full confirmation that is no longer there. I'm still questioning that if this is something which was well known, these are people who left the airport, they had documentation to prove that they boarded a flight. There is evidence that they've been in the front line fighting for the Russia. Won't we have some kind of accountability of?
So the traceability, from the perspective of you can trace how he was recruited, the recruiters, the exercise and whatever, but the backward line is not there. Yeah. That's where the frustration comes from.
Yeah.
And you've been trying to address this with Ministry of Diaspora.
Several. I've written several mails. They are not answering. It is only the Russian embassy in Kenya who responded and said you can reach out to the Kenyan embassy in Russia. And I reached out. Luckily enough, also Njenga shared with me a cell phone number of an officer working there. At first, he was still responding and saying we are working on it, and then later on, he just went silent. He's not answering his calls. So you see, it is frustrating us that, of course, we know death is inevitable, especially when you are in a war zone. But this is a foreign country where at least there should be some level of accountability to say that we are sorry, it's no longer there, so that we can see on a proper way of doing it, bringing it to a closure.
Yeah.
Then we just accept and move on. But now it puts us in a limbo. We don't know whether to accept that he's no longer there. We don't know whether to accept that maybe one day he can resurface. Possibly he ran out to a bush and still putting up, but also putting up for what time? Because you have to survive with food and water. So you see, there are so many questions running around the minds on whether,
of course,
how to address it.
So even as those questions are in your mind, these are the questions that are in the minds of many who are in different countries across the continent, because we do know that the African continent is offering up the most numbers for external players in this conflict. It changes the nature of the story. At what point does this stop being something that is a national issue and start to look something more systemic across the continent, that Africa is where a lot of these recruits are being gotten from. When African men are being drawn into conflicts that are not their own, what does it tell about this bigger picture? Away from the pain that you feel as a father and away from the memory that you have as a soldier in a war that is not your own, what does this say about how people are entering into these conflicts?
Personally, I would say that why would Russia sustain a war where they are not fighting? It's outsiders who are fighting, and they want to sustain that war. It should come to an end. I saw Donald Trump. There was a time we were tuned to a station with the family when Donald Trump was meeting Zelensky and Putin was it in Greenland, where there was a conversation, and we were hoping that the war could come to an end so that we have the release of the soldiers who are fighting, who are coming across the continent. And most of them are being driven by the fact that we live in a third world country where we are looking for opportunities. I don't know how Africa will organize itself to see that its own citizens are accounted for. At least we have a change of life. What pushes these people to go to such wars? We are not seeing on the perspective of what you are going to do, but you are seeing on the perspective on what you are going to get.
Yeah,
it's a laced portion that we are seeing something so nice, but it is laced. It's so dangerous.
So in terms of and I know on social media we've seen quite a few clips of Njenga and Felix actually, and then there was other people who was in that video as well. There's a propensity, as Ndu has mentioned, that there's a lot of recruits from the African continent, but having been on the front line, was it more so towards particular nationalities, or was it basically a bigger picture in terms of other countries that have joined a war that's not theirs?
No, we were mixed, but the Russians were the majority.
The Russians are the majority.
Yeah, they were the majority.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw the foreign minister of Russia denying that these are volunteers who are volunteering to participate in the war. You've heard, like Njenga said, there are agents in various countries who are conducting the recruitment exercise. The way I've said also, when Felix talked to me, it's like even some government agencies knew about the plan of them getting out. So how does it turn out to be a volunteer exercise?
Yeah.
And it is being done by government operatives both inside the African countries and also in Russia. There should be some form of accountability that when you are recruiting these people, you should also be accounting for them.
It's interesting that you say that.
Okay, I've got something. I'm still trying to wrap my head around something in terms of maybe it's just ignorance on my part, but it's not like you can put out an advert in the newspapers, come and enlist and whatever. How are you approached in terms of being recruited? Is it like, I don't know, is it a secret handshake? Is it a secret group, or somebody approached you?
How do you get in on it? Essentially, yeah.
How do you get how does the recruiter come up? How do they find you?
Mi vile nilijua, it was through a friend.
Okay.
My friend wanted to travel to Qatar, and he wanted to go to work as a driver. But since there was an opportunity to work as a driver in Qatar, the only job that were available was cleaners and laborers. But the agent told him, but there is a chance. You see, I have a military job. You go to work as a military in Russia. You don't need a commission. What you are going to do, you are going to compensate everything. Then you are going to refund later when you get paid. Yeah, he was the first to go. And after he stayed for a month, and so we were communicating. So I wanted to know whether it's a legit job or it's just you're getting scammed, you see. So he told me I have received the 1.3, 2.3. The agent have already deducted his 1 million, and every month I've been paid 340,000 Kenyan shillings. So that's why now I decided, now.
Sorry, this was another person who had already gone to the front line.
Yes.
And they made it back. Oh, so you were having a conversation when they were back here?
No,
when he was there.
He's there.
And he made it back.
He's lucky because he was his battalion. He's an artillery.
Okay.
He's an artillery. Now artillery, they never go to red zone. They always do their doings in the yellow zone or white zone. You see, because their job is only to missiles and rockets. You see.
So is there a rotation point? Because if somebody's in artillery and they never have to go to, and I'm sorry, I'm thinking like financially, I'm sorry, but if you're in the white zone or the yellow zone, you never have to go to the red zone.
No.
Why is this person who's in artillery being paid the same amount as somebody who's risking their life more in the red zone?
No, I don't know why. No, I don't know why.
That would have been my first question.
It would be interesting. So recently, I mean, just a few days ago from as we're having this conversation, the Russian Ministry of Defense, represented by Lavrov, had a conversation with, a meeting, high-level talk, with the Kenyan Minister for Foreign Affairs. He has had conversations with the same capacity in other countries about what's going on here, because it's gotten to a point where people are asking questions about what's happening. And there has been indication that certain foreign nationals from the African continent will no longer be eligible for this program. That's the talk over here. What's the real situation? Well, do you see a situation where another person who hears, okay, I can get 2.3 million shillings, will still go, even when we hear the outrage, we hear the stories of a father who may have lost his son, people might still go, Njenga?
Yes.
They'll still go.
I get so many messages on how people trying to
ask how to get it. Yeah.
How can I do it?
And they know that people are dying.
I got one who reached out to me and say, please reach out to Felix to make a connection for me. I told him, in fact, we are not in communication with Felix. And he said, please, when you get a chance, I want to go there. So there's still a push.
That is scary. And it's weaponizing situations where people are not have to then basically look at what other means can I use to actually feed my family, make sure that's okay. And if somebody has seen the results of what's been happening and they're still wanting to be recruited, I don't think if we as a continent, even if we say, this is no longer our war, people will still want to say, okay, fine, I'm not at where I live right now. I don't have a means of being able to do anything for myself. So,
I'll
take my chances.
Do you think it should stop? So, I mean, the father of one, the one who's been there, do you think it should actually stop and that there should be no recruitment for folks in this conflict? Do you think so? Or do you think it's an opportunity? Like what Waweru was saying, you can feed your children. I mean, 0 to 340,000 shillings a month is not a bad jump. Would you say that it should stop?
It should stop.
It should stop. Okay.
It should stop. I don't know what happened. What happened with the talks between Zelensky and Putin to put to arrest? Because once the war is put to arrest, then there will be no desire to go there. But as much as the war is still on, some people are still seeing opportunities. When you tell them people are losing life, it's like, to them it looks like, I'll do it differently from the rest, not knowing that which particular zone you are going to operate in. And it's just a single bullet and you're
And that's it. Do they tell you the zones, or that you're being told once you're in St. Petersburg and you're doing your training? Did they tell you about the zones you're going to be fighting in, or that just happened when you get
when you're in the training now, it depends with the battalion you join. Yeah.
So the recruiters do not tell you any of this beforehand?
No, recruiters don't know anything about the military now.
Wow. Okay, so now that brings me to the question about accountability then. Yeah? And the reason why I'm so upset with the recruiters. But when you break it down across the full entire chain, you've got your recruiters, you've got the facilitators, you've got state institutions, and you've got the military structures who are receiving. So the Russians are the ones who are receiving the recruits who are coming from Kenya. where does the responsibility sit most heavily?
It's an open question.
No, yeah, please. It's for anybody who wants to.
Of course, the government should be responsible. That these are your citizens. Of course, you should not let just anybody do anybody, especially anything, especially this involves other nations, not your own nation. How safe is the venture these people are getting in? Of course, you should have done a due diligence to know that is it a safe venture for my citizens, and look for all means of ensuring that they are not recruited, and more than that, address the challenges these people are going through, so that it doesn't turn out to be an opportunity for them outside, rather than how can we address our own problems so that we don't
Have to rely on somebody else.
Do you blame anyone, Njenga? Do you blame anybody for this? Or do you blame Njenga?
I blame myself. I don't blame anybody.
Okay. And what does that feel? I mean, in terms of, I'm looking at, for you, you blame yourself, but what does that accountability now look like in terms of, in practice? Will you then be the voice that says to people, do not listen to these recruiters, do not go to Russia, because this is the reality on the ground?
Kenyans will remain being Kenyans, because as we are seeing videos and stories of people who are dying there are still people who want to go. You see? No, I don't. You always sioni kama kuna vile unaweza make someone to understand that this place is dangerous, don't go, and yet you came back alive. You see?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That makes sense.
When so they're expecting some miracles. They're expecting some miracles, sort of.
You know, like so the question, the answer, when you tell them this place is dangerous, you can die. He'll tell you, even here I can die. You see, you can die anywhere. You see, so it's better I go die there, earning, but
does it tell a bigger story then about the desperation that people feel within countries, whether around the continent, where you'd rather be in a situation where there's some money coming or there's something coming to you as opposed to doing what? Staying at home and suffering? Does it tell a bigger story?
You cannot stay home and suffer. You always take a risk.
It's a bigger story on the depth of the problems the citizens of these African countries are going through. Would you imagine? Okay, we have Njenga and Felix here in Kenya. How would we also get recruitment even in Tanzania, get in Ghana? You see that web networking until even they get themselves in fighting for Russia and get to know themselves that I come from this country, I come from this country. You would see the passion they have in, of course, like Njenga said, he had passion in joining the military, but you also see the recruitment process of going to military in Kenya. Like I saw a requirement of having 32 teeth. It's a challenge, and somebody might be having the passion of wanting to participate to defend the country, but has no that opportunity, and he has an opportunity which has opened up. Despite the challenges it comes with it, somebody would say, "Let me there," and
so, in essence, then you have sort of described what Felix was probably going through in terms of what he was thinking. So you can possibly understand why he went there in the first place, despite the fact that you did not want him to go there. He knew.
He knew that he's going to a war. He's going to be trained for 2 weeks, and I was asking him, our training here normally takes 6 months. How are you taking two weeks? And like Njenga said, this was supposed to be ex-military. What, at least having some training skills. It was only to enhance their skills. So you would see the deception which existed along the chain. And according to him, he was telling me, I asked him a question. what happens if somebody dies?
Hmm.
He says that they are in the yellow zone. I think in the yellow zone, there is collection of the bodies, and they are taken back. They are flown back to their countries.
No.
So that is at the first instance when he told me. But later on, he told me that there are lying bodies all over,
Just
and
left.
nobody is picking them. So it's like there's no accountability when it comes to that level. When do you cease fighting for them? They just pick somebody else. They don't care as long as the war is being sustained.
So let me ask, I'm going to come back again, and I'm come to you, Njenga. Training for 2 weeks, what are you being trained to do against, I'm assuming, okay, maybe the Ukrainians also recruited people who are probably in the same situation. You don't know for sure, but 2 weeks, what are you being trained to do?
Now it was depending with the battalion you are. If your battalion is artillery, now they are going to train you shooting and rockets and all those grenades and all those. If you are battalion which they are going for shooting, they are going to train you about shooting. Yes, and grenade only.
So you were in a situation where you had to go hand-to-hand combat.
Yes.
Was that any part of the training?
No.
That was survival.
That was survival.
Pure survival.
Pure survival.
Okay.
So, with all of this, so you left with you're not quite sure, looking for some closure. Njenga saying, well, I got out of it alive. And you know that there are some other people who are still there, who are fighting. There's still people who are going, as recently as, a week ago. We know that this is happening. Well aware. On the other side of it, there's some people who go looking for jobs abroad who do not know they're going to fight this war. They don't know. But then they're met with that, I don't know if to call it an opportunity now when they're there. How would you advise? Would you say double check again before you know, or take the opportunity, if you were to be honest?
You have to think twice before joining military. And not only military where there is war. Now joining Russian military and they are fighting, obviously they are going to take you to war. You see, it's not like Kenya or another country. It's like even going to like Iran, they are fighting. So when you join them, you're going to war. You see, it's job, but not now. Okay. Not now. Okay. If they can recruit after they finish this war, I can say
it's different.
It's different.
It's different.
So which point, and I'm just going to ask what we do ask, but in a different way, especially to Baba Felix. When do you think that people should be able to intervene early enough? Right? Yes. And at which level are we intervening in? Is it at individual level, like what Njenga and Felix went through? Coming together as a family and saying, we don't think it's the right thing for you to do. Lobbying the government, or at least government having some sort of sense of transparency to say, yes, we have vetted A, these recruiters. B, this is what you're actually going into, as opposed to relying on somebody who has never been in a red zone, white zone, or yellow zone. And couldn't, at the end of the day, they don't have any responsibility towards your son or towards Njenga.
The war should end as soon as possible. That is my request, that there's no need of losing more lives on something which seemingly, like Russia wanted to push Ukrainians to take over Kyiv, and they are using foreigners to fight for them. If they cannot fight for their own war, why should they involve some other people to come in? Back home here, there should be a mechanism on how to a government can intervene on such matters, so that the recruiters or those being recruited are taken through to understand what they are likely to face as they are going for these ventures, so that it's not kasi maju too, but let us see on the safety of it, whether it is good for a country. And at the family level, at least, like the way I said, it's like we took it casually. that you were saying that I'm going, and it should have been to a point where we are together, so that the level of convincing is when you are one-on-one, rather than just having a phone conversation and maybe it's already made up the mind. The way Njenga said, you wanted to explore, and you are exploring something which has a lot of dangers, more than the benefits you are going to get. So there should be some level of engagements, but bottom line, the way the international community has come in, it should come to an end. It's over 4 years, and nothing is coming out of it. It's only continuous war.
Something you just said that's triggered me. In terms of, and again, this is going to go back to Njenga. You said weighing out the balances, and I was looking at, when you weigh out, fine, 2.3 or 1.3 versus your life, how did this one make the balance? I'm looking at the thought process. I can understand maybe there's hardships that you're going through, and okay, maybe not personally understand your hardships, but when you would look at the balance, you say, I can potentially lose my life, but I could earn 1.3 million shillings and 340,000 every month after that. You cannot compare life and money.
At all.
Not at all.
Yeah. But this is from your experience, and I'm wondering whether people need to hear more of that.
Like I said, it was a very huge mistake joining. Yes. Okay. A very big mistake.
Yeah. Okay.
And on my perspective, Felix saw an opportunity. She lost, possibly, and no benefit. So what eventually?
What's the benefit?
Yeah.
Nothing at all. We are not with him. There's nothing. So it's like, it puts us in a very awkward position.
Yeah. To be understood.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you both for talking to us on Panel 54 today. To be able to hear these experiences, there's a lot to then take in, to learn from, to understand about how our world works. But thank you for joining us in this conversation today.
What stands out in this conversation is how early this story begins, long before anyone calls it recruitment, long before anyone calls it war. It starts with something that looks legitimate, a job, a contract, a pathway out.
And by the time the reality becomes visible, the individual is already inside a system that's very difficult to step away from, which shifts how you think about responsibility, because this isn't just about what happens at that point of deployment.
It's about everything that happens before that. The offer, the information, the conditions that make that decision feel like the right one at the time.
And it raises a broader question about protection. Not just whether states respond when something goes wrong, but whether they're able to prevent people from entering that situation in the first place.
Because if that protection comes too late, then what we're really looking at is not just a failure of enforcement, but a failure of visibility, a system that operates just far enough out of sight until it's already done its work. And that brings us back to the question that we started with. How does this happen? And more importantly, where do you intervene so that it doesn't happen again? Oh.
You've been listening to Panel 54, where we rethink the world one African perspective at a time. If it made you pause, reflect, or reframe, share it. Start a conversation and tag us in. Find us on our social media handles at Panel54Pod or your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.